Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, Spiritual Quest. And today, we're going to hear some words from J.D. Sumner, and we're going to continue in Chapter 5 of The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner, a book that was very important to Elvis, and it was the first book that Larry Geller gave to Elvis in 1964. But before we do all that, we're going to come into the episode with a song. And this is a song about a very special cross that Elvis saw on the Circle G, and it spoke to him during a period when he was seeking spiritual guidance. Hello, Gunn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. This is Cross on the Circle.
He saw the cross at dawn and said, "It's a good omen, and a dream again." At the break of dawn, through the window pane, he saw a cross in morning rain. White as grace, tall as prayer, calling him to build and share. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a place of love alone, where laughter rides on horse's breath and peace outshines the fear of death. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Mobile homes and barbecue nights, trucks and trials and porch light rides. The hand-picked heart to share the dream, a mythic village by the stream. This is more than land, it's grace, refuge carved in sacred space, a gift of love to friends and kin, protected from the world's loud din. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home, come home, where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Oh, come and share the love of all.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And let the first echo we hear today be these words from J.D. Sumner, who was a friend of Elvis's. He knew him before he was famous, and he worked with him for many years on the stage. And J.D. Sumner says, Jesus Christ holds the keys to the kingdom of God, and he makes the decision on who gets in, not books or articles such as I have read. I believe Elvis is in heaven. I knew the man, his temptations, his successes, and failures. He was a man, not a god. He was not perfect, but he was a God-fearing, humble, kind, generous human being. J.D. Sumner tells us that as far as he's concerned, as far as he knows, Elvis was a Christian and Elvis went to heaven. And there's no doubt in J.D. Sumner's mind. On screen, we can see a button that J.D. once wore that indicated he was an Elvis show member, J.D. Sumner. The button's orange. It's a lapel button, so it's got a pin on the back of it. And it's got his name on there, all in capital letters, J.D. Sumner. And this gave him access to everywhere within the show. It's how he got backstage so he could do his job, get onto the stage, and sing with his quartet. And there were a period of years where his quartet opened the show, or his group. I think there might have been 5 at certain times. JD had known Elvis when he was a child, or not when he was a child, but when he was transitioning from a teenager into a man. Elvis would go to listen to the Gospels. They had gospel sings down at a stage in Memphis at an auditorium. And Elvis didn't always have the money to get in. It wasn't real expensive, but as we know, Elvis couldn't afford to purchase his 15-cent school lunches every day. So he didn't have the money to get into things like gospel sings all the time. And when JD found out he didn't have the money, but he was always there, JD started letting him in the back door. And JD says that soon after Elvis hit the big time in the 1950s, he bought a $30,000 home on Audubon Drive in Memphis. Now that $30,000 home on Audubon Drive, if you correct that for inflation or adjust it for inflation for today, that's like a $300,000 house. It's roughly 10 or more times as much as it was in the 1950s. So it's at least a $300,000 house. And Gunn says that JD said he met Elvis when he was 14 years old. Right. Which I believe it's the 4 years that Elvis was in high school. That was his training to become a man. And I don't see him as a child exactly during that period. But he's not a friend from Tupelo. I think that's maybe a better way to say it so that people don't get confused. He's not from Tupelo. He did know Elvis in Memphis before Elvis graduated from high school. Hi, petite Madeline DeLorraine. Nice to see you. I don't believe that I've ever seen you in chat before, so welcome to the show. Are you an Elvis fan? And J.D. Sumner goes on, and he says, down the street and around the corner lived Brother James Hamill, pastor of the First Assembly of God, which Elvis's family attended. That's an interesting detail I've never really noticed before, but that means that the pastor of the First Assembly of God Church lived, if he lived in this neighborhood, down the street and around the corner, he's probably in another house that would have, today been over $300,000. That seems interesting since he was the pastor of that church. But JD says, besides Brother Hamill, lived Johnny Cash. So Elvis lived in this neighborhood. Down the street and around the corner lived his pastor. And next to his pastor lived Johnny Cash. And JD says Johnny Cash was also beginning to get a taste of the big time. He was one of those signed by Sun Records about the same time Elvis was. But Elvis made it into the big time sooner. One morning, I went to pick up Brother Hamill to play golf. So there's another interesting tidbit for you. Elvis's pastor and J.D. Sumner play golf. And they play golf together. But J.D. says, one morning I went to pick up Brother Hamill to play golf. And when I tooted the horn, Johnny Cash, who was working in his yard, dropped his tools, came over to the car, and said, Mr. Sumner, I really enjoy your singing. Can I have an autograph? So even Johnny Cash loved the performances of J.D. Sumner. And so that tells you why Elvis wanted him to be opening up his shows and why he wanted to work with J.D. Beyond that, he just loved J.D. as a person, but J.D. was talented. That's recognized by Johnny Cash. And here's the TCBID for the Elvis Presley concerts for J.D. Sumner. There's a lot of glare on this particular picture, so it is difficult to make out the details, but you can see JD's smiling face. He had that long 70s haircut that it's like a super Beatles haircut. Because it's still in the shape of a Beatles haircut, but his hair is like even longer. And then he's got that mustache. He's always had that mustache. And J.D. Sumner said, I knew Elvis. I knew how he thought. Especially I knew how he thought about religious matters. Yes, I think Elvis is in heaven. So JD reaffirms his belief that Elvis was a Christian, believed in God, believed in Jesus, and went to heaven. Rejoined his mother Gladys. And here's a picture of JD and Elvis together. And you can see that Elvis has a very fancy coat on. It's a certain 1970s style that he found very appealing. And JD himself is sporting some 70s style with his tie, which is very wide. It is a wide, wide tie. And you can see that JD still got that super Beatles haircut. Elvis has got some long hair too, similar to how we've seen him in some karate pictures. So this is sometime in the 1970s. And that was just a little moment to meet Elvis's friend J.D. Sumner, who talked with Elvis often about religion and his views about Elvis's spiritual side. But now let's return to the text that we're reading And Gunn asked, was JD a Christian too? Yes, he was. Now, he'll be the first to tell you that God is a forgiving God. And if God wasn't forgiving, then JD would not be making it to heaven. Because he freely admits that he made a lot of errors in his life and he was making them all the time. And one thing that JD would do is get up really early in the morning. He was always up before everyone else. And he'd make himself a cup of coffee. He said that was the most important cup of coffee of the day because he would sit with that cup of coffee and commune with the Lord. And that was the time of his day that was set aside every day. And he spent other time during the day, but no matter what was going on in his life, that time was set aside so that he could study his Bible or spend it in prayer. Prayer, which would have been to JD a form of meditation, much like Elvis was meditating, and just as the impersonal life and Psalm 46:10 have told us, be still and know I am God. JD spent his entire career singing gospel songs, bringing people to Christ. Now, he did a lot of worldly things while he was doing that. And he had his own personal issues. And he'd tell you that he's not a perfect person, and he'll tell you that Elvis was not a perfect person. But JD was Christian, and he judged Elvis to be Christian as far as he could tell. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you. But to jump back into the impersonal life, just to review what we've already read in this chapter, the chapter's trying to reveal the key that unlocks wisdom, power, and conscious oneness with the divine. And that it's instructing the reader, including Elvis, to study and reflect on the meaning of the words until they make sense. In other words, you will not understand it the first time you read it. Read it again. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you. And because we're supposed to read it again, that's why we're doing this review. And the text promises that we will begin recognizing inner signs after sincere contemplation. This text also talks about the unity of the I Am. The basic idea here is that everything is part of God, and everything is moving to fulfill his purpose, even those pieces which have free will and have chosen to move against his purpose. Because God does not recognize time as something which exists. It doesn't exist. God is outside of time, which is our mortal construct. All is one for him, including all the moments of our lives. So he already knows everything that we're going to choose. He's given us the free will to choose it, and hopes and prays that we'll make the right choice at the right moment. But he's already planned for the wrong choice because he knows that's the one we're going to make. So we are still fulfilling his purpose, even in those moments. And it's all part of being the unity. And this is all part of what doesn't make any sense. And that you have to read over and over and contemplate in stillness in order to fully grasp. And there's also talk about souls and divine nature. The book finally brings out the word soul And it indicates that it is the immortal part of your being, which is also that divine part of your being, the same one the text has already been talking about, the I am. And that all else is a mortal shell that will one day be cast aside. And that our soul is one with the soul of the divine, plus one with the soul of all of our brothers and sisters. It's an extension of the idea that all is one within the divinity, the idea of unity. And it again reiterates that everything that is not part of the divine, which is your body, your mind, your intellect, these are not part of the divine. These are phases of your human nature. And at the end of this life, they will be gone, but your divine portion will continue. And then the book reveals the key, which is to think is to create, which would have resonated greatly with Elvis as a creator. And as you think in your heart, so it is with you. This is a way of saying that you create your own reality. You define your own purpose. You have free will. It's saying all of those things. And then it goes on to discuss the power of thought, and that's really where we left off. So we're going to return to the text. And it says, to think is to create, or as you think in your heart, so it is with you. Stop and meditate on this, that it may get firmly fixed in your mind. So we just came back through from our stop and meditation. It's probably not firmly fixed in our minds yet, because we're going through this as an entertainment show and trying to find what this would have meant to Elvis. So we are not spending the meditative time that this book is actually asking us to. But we are getting an idea of what it says. And it says a thinker is a creator. A thinker lives in a world of his own conscious creation. The book again tells us that you create your own reality. You form your own purpose. You are part of the environment around you, and it's reflecting you. And I think that resonated deeply with Elvis, who created his presence on stage or in the movies, who staged a life at Graceland. So that's where he lived. It was his home, but it was also a showpiece. It was his own creation. From the moment that he bought it, he began to have it remodeled. And the entire time he lived there, he continued to remodel and expand. It constantly reflected the changing him. He did this with his other properties as well, and with his clothes, and with his cars. So Elvis had long inhabited a world of his own conscious creation, even his inner circle. And the text says that when you once know how to think, you can create at will anything you wish, whether it be a new personality, a new environment, or a new world. I think this would have spoken to Elvis because he'd already done these things. So he must already know how to do this thinking, he just hasn't named it for himself yet. And so that's what the text is going to do for him. It's going to say, hey, Elvis, you've been doing this. You just didn't know you were doing it. We're going to tease it apart and take a look at it in detail so that you can have some more control over the thinking and the creation. You've been doing it nearly spontaneously. And now the book, the I Am, is going to allow you to manipulate it in greater detail. And the book says, let us see if we cannot grasp some of the truths hidden and controlled by this key. You have been shown all consciousness is one, and how it is all my consciousness, and yet is also yours, and likewise that of the animal, the plant, the stone, and the invisible cell. The message of unity is again broadcast from the book. It's hitting this over and over and over, that we are one with the whole universe. Hi, Jen. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And then the book says, you have seen how this consciousness is controlled by my will, which causes the invisible cells to unite and form the various organisms for the expression and use of the different centers of intelligence through which I desire to express. This passage is indicating that the cells of your body have been created and are being held together, not just through your will, but through the I Am's will, of which your will is just a portion. But it's that will which is infusing everything and bringing order from chaos. So we've got to remember again, order from chaos. Order is life. Chaos is death. We cannot exist in chaos. Our bodies reflect the order of the divine. The book says, but you cannot yet see how you can direct and control the consciousness of the cells of your own body, not to speak of those of other bodies, even if you and I and they are all one in consciousness and intelligence. The book tells us you're starting to get a hold of this, but you're not there yet, because you're understanding we're all one, but you're not seeing that it's possible to not only control the cells of your own body, but those of others. You continue to resist this idea. But it's okay. Because like the message of unity, even though I haven't read further in this book, I have an idea that it's going to hit us with this message quite a few more times. The book says, by paying special attention to what follows, however, you now may be enabled to see this. So the book promises it's going to show you how to see this. It just told you you're not. It knows that you're resistive. You know, you're not accepting this yet. And the book says that's fine. Let's just keep walking forward. As we continue our progress, you will see what I'm talking about. So it's a very comforting text. Even if you don't understand it, it says just stick with me. We're going to figure it out. And Gunn asks, control other bodies. Exactly, Gunn. This book is stating that there is no difference between the cells of your body and the cells of anybody else's body, because we are all one. And this is reflected in pop culture when you watch the movie Star Wars and they use the Force to move objects around. When they're using the Force, they're connecting to the cells or the structures, the microscopic invisible structures that make up whatever that object is, that are imbued with portions of the Force, and they're using that connection to move those objects. That's why little bitty Yoda can move the whole X-Wing. But Luke can't, because he can't envision that he can, nor does he understand he is one with the X-Wing. That's what the book is telling us. Lucas has lifted those ideas, either from this text or from other thoughts that followed this text that are very near to it, and he's implanted those into his movie. But it is saying that you could potentially heal another, and it's giving this as a possible scientific explanation for how Jesus performed his healing miracles. That he was controlling the cells of their body because he was in touch with the divine and the divine within their body. Now, do we need an actual explanation for how a mystery works or a miracle works? Well, no. The miracle is supposed to be accepted on faith. And so when you bring in these scientific explanations, which is what George Lucas did when he rebooted the series, the Star Wars series, and brought in the prequels and talked about the mitochondrions or whatever, the mitochondrions and the Force being in them. He got too granular in this detail, and he destroyed the mystery of the miracle. And therefore, it destroyed the need for faith. And that's why this is, the other movies, they don't resonate like the first one did. Because you have to have faith in the miracles. And Gunn says, are we supposed to control other bodies? Well, that's a good question, Gunn. Would it be ethical to control someone else's body? Well, perhaps if they are not in tune, and the only way for them to be healed would be for you to take that control. But I think you're also asking, could this control be abused? I don't think that it could, because then you would not be in line with the divine, and therefore you would not have the power to control another's cells. Once you fell out of attunement, your power to control your own cells would be very iffy, let alone another's. And Jen says that we are one with the universe. And Gunn asks, but control? So Gunn is keying in on the word control, which I believe she's stating that it has a connotation that you are overpowering the will of the other. So again, I think if you were to try to use the power of the divine to overpower another, who also has a divine will and has been granted free will by the divine, that again, your power will become inert because you will be out of alignment. You will not be attuned to the divine, and therefore, you will not be able to perform miracles. You must be in alignment. So anything that would be against that alignment, you will not be able to do. Now, in Star Wars, you could, because you would use the dark side of the Force. But there's no dark side to God's power and God's alignment. The dark side is our own choice to misalign from the divine. That is the darkness. And Gunn has clarified that she knows that we're one with the universe, but she's asking, are we supposed to control other bodies? And so I think maybe the word control here is not the best choice Benner could have made. I think what he's saying, well, I think there are also bodies that we would interact with that have no free will, right? Like the stones or the trees or non-human or non-animal life. These most likely, because I don't know how far free will has been granted. I think it's only to those of us who can move around, like animals and people. And maybe not even to animals, but when I watch an animal, I've got some pets, they seem to have a lot of free will. So I would think they've been granted free will. I'm not a biblical scholar, so I don't know that for sure. But it looks like they have. But other pieces of the universe don't have that free will. And then, yes, we could control those however we wanted. Those were all given to us to control anyway when we left the Garden of Eden, as well as the animals. But I think our use of animals in that sense is if we can, tame them or catch them because they have their own free will and they don't want to do anything with us. And Terry says that he likes the Elvis song "Walk a Mile in My Shoes" and that he would not want to control other bodies. That's a good point too. You'd have responsibility at that point for what you've done and for that person. So I'm not sure I'd want that responsibility either. But again, if you had been able to perform what we would think of as a miracle, then it was in line with the divine will. And therefore, you wouldn't really have any responsibility issues because you would have done the right thing for sure. I know that's all confusing, right? And I probably made it even more confusing. But let's move on because as we know, the text has already told us, you're going to not understand this and you're going to have to wrestle around with it. But now if we pay special attention to what follows, we may be able to see what the text is talking about. And it says, have you ever taken the pains to study out what is consciousness? How it seems to be an impersonal state of awareness, of waiting to serve or to be directed or used by some power latent in and intimately related to itself. How man seems to be merely the highest type of organism containing this consciousness, which is directed and used by this power within itself. So it seems like the text is now addressing the animals that I was talking about. And it's saying that we as men are just the highest form of this consciousness, which is directed and used by the power within itself. There's something about free will here. It's muddy to me. So let's move on. And that this power latent in man's consciousness and in all consciousness is nothing but will, my will. For you know that all power is but the manifestation of my will. It's bringing back the message of unity. Saying that consciousness is a tool that we're able to use through our will, which is a piece of the divine will. And the text says, now you have been told that in the beginning I created man in my image and likeness, after which I breathed into him the breath of life, and he became a living soul. the text is relating the story of creation to us. And hello, Tarzan. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Tarzan says that they agree that we are created in God's image. So this makes sense. And so the text is telling us that part of the image is the will. We have a portion of the divine will, so we must be made in the image and likeness. And the text says, by creating man in my image and likeness, I created an organism capable of expressing all my consciousness and all my will, which means likewise all my power, my intelligence, and my love. Now the text is defining that man is the only organism. This would not include the animal, who may have free will, but they are not capable of expressing all of his consciousness or my consciousness. Now, I think this means when it says all, that each person is capable of expressing a facet of the divine consciousness, so that together we would express all of the consciousness. But obviously, we've already been told no one of us could hold that, because it would mean instant death for us, just as we cannot look upon the glory of God. It's too much for us. So I think this expressing of all of the consciousness is expressed through all of humanity, as well as all of my will, and all of my power, my intelligence, my love. All of humanity is focusing all of God's power here on earth. And the text says, I therefore made it perfect in the beginning, patterning it after my own perfection. So we may be seeking perfection, and this may have spoken to Elvis as well. He's searching. What's he searching for? Well, he's got to be searching in some part for his own perfection. He's trying to make himself a better person, trying to learn how to be a better person. What is it that the I Am wants him to do? He wants to be able to commune with it. And the text is telling us, and Elvis, you are already perfect. You are as you should be. I have already imbued you with the divine, and therefore, this is who you are. Your job now is to listen and carry out the instruction. It's not about finding yourself. It's about be still and know I am God. And Tarzan asked, what book is this? This is The Impersonal Life, which is the first book that Larry Geller gave to Elvis, and which triggered Elvis's visible spiritual quest, because he began collecting a lot of different books and reading through them. But this particular text, Elvis bought hundreds of copies of this text. He annotated them, and he gave them away to his friends and family and loved ones. Elvis knew they would not read this book. It's a very difficult book to read, especially by yourself. But Elvis did know they would read his annotations. And in those annotations, he reflected scriptures or pointed to scriptures within the book, such as Psalm 46:10, which the book uses as one of the mantras of the book and becomes a mantra for Elvis that he says over and over each day, somewhat as a calming and a meditative ritual and a reminder: be still and know I am God. And the text says, when I breathed into man's organism my breath, it became alive with me. For then it was I breathed into it my will, not from without, but from within, from the kingdom of heaven within, where always I am. So I think in our minds, when we imagine God breathing life into man for the first time, it's somewhat like watching someone do CPR. They give the kiss of life and they blow the breath into the body. But here, the I am is telling us it wasn't anything like that. I created man, and from within, where I live, where my home base is, put the kingdom of heaven right there in his heart. So I was already there. And then I, from there, inflated him with the breath of life. So it's not that God touched us once and we then lived. It's that God moved in, took over residence, and then he turned on all the electricity and the water and got the mail service running. He's living there. And that's when we got the breath of life, is when God was within us. And the text says, and afterward I breathed, and I lived, and had my being within man, for I created him in my image and likeness, only for that purpose. The I am saying that it built a summer house, vacation home, a place where it can reside and feel just like it's in the kingdom of heaven. Because it's taken a piece of that kingdom of heaven and put it right there in your heart. Like Elvis purchasing the Circle G and trying to make it into a bigger, better Graceland. And eventually he incorporates the Circle G back into Graceland. That God is a part of us now and always, and it cannot be separated, even by those who defy him and throw him out of their heart. That he still owns the deed. And he's still got the key, and he can come back in when he wants, but he's not going to until you invite him back. But even then, he's still with you. Because you, even in those moments, are serving his purpose. The one that he created you for in his own image and likeness. And so that must have also comforted Elvis, that even in the moments when he defied God, he still managed to serve him. Now, is that a justification for defying God? No. It's divine grace. That God has allowed you to make these errors and yet accepted them unto his holy purpose. And in the next piece, the text says, the proof of this is man does not and cannot breathe of himself. I think that's telling us that we don't create life. The text says something far greater than his conscious, natural self lives in his body and breathes through his lungs. The book says there's got to be more to the miracle of your being alive than you, than your mortal self. This is too fabulous and too much of a miracle to just be something that occurs by chance. It says that a mighty power within his body thus uses the lungs, even as it uses the heart to force the blood containing the life it indrew through the lungs to every cell of the body, as it uses the stomach and other organs to digest and assimilate food, to make blood, tissue, hair, and bone, as it uses the brain, the tongue, the hands, and feet to think and say and do everything that man does. This power is my will to be and live in man. I believe this is another message about order versus chaos, and it's showing us that the proof that God exists is the complex order that your body represents. You have a whole bunch of separate systems that are working within your body that are created from component parts, of which are themselves created from component parts in a massive organized structure. Something that is so organized it still is beyond the capability of man to come anywhere close to this organization, even in our greatest accomplishments. You can't point to a single one that matches the miracle of the human body, which is a miracle because of the order that it contains. And that order is a shout against chaos. It's a direct assault against chaos, saying that life is order and life will prevail, and that life is only here because of God's will and God being imbued in that organism. That is the life. And that life is reflected within that organizational structure. That's how we know it's life. And Gunn says, Elvis reading this must have wondered why his inner organs became so bad, and what he could or would have done differently. That is a very interesting thought, Gunn. And I know that Elvis knew he had internal issues, and he knew that from the early on he had some kind of colon issue. But I don't think he knew that his other organs, like his liver and his heart, were impacted. He did have a liver biopsy, but that biopsy said his liver was fine. So I think whatever they thought was happening with his liver, they ruled out because of that biopsy, which it could not have shown that his liver was enlarged. It wouldn't have been able to show that. But yes, he knew he had internal pain. And so how did he reconcile that with the thoughts of being able to control his cells, of being able to heal himself, of his faith in the medical system, and yet their inability to treat him properly? I don't know. But that's definitely something we should be thinking about as we move through this. And that Gunn says we should also be thinking about that Elvis had a kingdom with Graceland. And yet everything then became chaos. That's a very good observation, Gunn. And I think part of that could be explained by the fact that if you look at Elvis as, in terms of his interests, spirituality, karate, love of family, love of friends, specific people within those groups, different hobbies that he had, the foods that he ate, he lived a spiral pattern, by which I mean he would be intensely interested in something, and when he finished that particular spiral, that thing either fell away forever or it fell into the background. And as he spiraled through his life, he would begin another spiral where that piece would resurface to the top. For instance, karate. He says that he practiced it every day, but we know that there were times in his life, specific periods, when it was up front and he was thinking about it a lot. We know the same is true of the spiritual books. It looks like at the time that he got married, the spiritual books had spiraled and he had left them to begin this marriage cycle. And at some turn during that spiral, he again returns to the books, but it's not for a while, right? So he's got all of these things that are moving through his mind, but they're never as important from one day to the next as his interest or his focus moves. And I think towards the end of his life, he was spiraling in a way like I think they call it a dreidel, but it's a top, a child's toy. And as you spin it, it spins for a while, and towards the end, it will begin to wobble as it spirals, and the spirals get out of control. And I think like from 76 through 77, his moods and his interest and his thoughts are spiraling in that pattern because of the toxins and the drugs that are built up in his body, as well as the massive stress load that he's taking on, plus his interpersonal relationships with the Memphis Mafia and Ginger Alden, and even Linda Thompson, who leaves in December 76. So I think that's part of what leads to the chaos, is that his focus leaves the spiritual as he is forced to focus on the physical because of the pain and the issues. But that's just my reading of it, and we haven't gone through that period yet. So these are my preliminary thoughts. Again, I try not to form opinions now because I find as we go through, I'm finding so much more because we're looking at things so closely. And so I never know when my mind's going to change or when it's not. So I don't want to marry into any of my opinions. You know, I need to be able to jettison them and move on to the truth. I need to always keep the truth in the front, and that's the focus that I'm looking for. But are we seeing the truth? That I don't know. We're seeing what I can see so far, and I'm sharing it with all of you. And that's where we're going to stop today. And we're going to leave on a song. And this song talks about Elvis struggling with the same questions that we're struggling with right now as he moved through these texts and as we walk with him. And this is Word on Fire. You all keep on taking care of business.
He cried.